Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar organized as part of the project From Raw Collection to Digital Collection, or simply RCtoDC. My name is Mateja Šuljak, and I am part of the RCtoDC team at Ursula DOO. Before we get started, I would just like to go over a few housekeeping items to ensure everything runs smoothly. Please make sure your microphones are muted during the presentation to avoid background noise. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and we will address them either during the presentation or at the end, depending on our timing. For any technical issues, please reach out via the chat, and we'll do our best to assist you. Thank you for being here, and now we can start. Firstly, I would like to say a few words about Ursula. Ursula is specialized for recording and management of cultural heritage. We catalog and manage a private collection, Zvonko Stojević Museum collection, owned by Mr. Stojević. The collection consists of over 50,000 artworks and objects by the famous Croatian artist Boris Bučan. Also, I would like to say a few words on the project itself. Ursula is one of the beneficiaries and the coordinator of the RCtoDC project. Other beneficiaries of the project are the Austrian company Media Production 100 GmbH and the University of Ljubljana. Our associated partners are the Zagreb City Museum, the National Gallery of Ljubljana, and the City Museum of Ljubljana. I can see that some of our associated partners are also here, so also welcome. The project officially started on October 1st, and yesterday we held our RCtoDC opening conference. I can see that some of you that joined us today were also yesterday, so also thank you for coming again to see us. The aim of the RCtoDC project is to enrich the common European data space for cultural heritage using advanced 3D and XR technologies. It will help digitalize cultural heritage institutions and create 2 new collections on Europeana featuring artifacts at risk from natural disasters. The project will also provide a 3D digitization toolkit, XR solutions for online experiences, and training for cultural institutions and stakeholders. Involving partners from Croatia, Slovenia, and Austria, the project focuses on cultural preservation and digital advancement across Europe. Today, we are going to discuss an important topic that shapes the way we manage, preserve, and share cultural heritage, and that is the implementation of standards in heritage management. The management of cultural heritage requires a well-organized and systematic approach, and this is where standards come into play. They are essential for ensuring effective preservation, accessibility, and use of cultural heritage. By providing a structured framework, standards guide institutions in cataloging, documenting, and conserving objects in a way that maximizes both efficiency and consistency. Today, we will focus on 4 key standards that are widely adopted in the management of cultural heritage: Object ID, Spectrum Standard, Dublin Core, and Europeana Data Model, or EDM. Each of these standards plays a unique role in preserving and making heritage more accessible. Object ID is an international standard for documenting and describing archaeological, cultural, and artistic objects. It was created through collaboration between museums, law enforcement, customs, the art trade, insurance companies, and appraisers. The Object ID standard was launched in 1997 by the Getty Information Institute, and it has been promoted by major law enforcement agencies and cultural heritage organizations. Since 2004, the International Council of Museums holds the license rights to promote and use this standard. So why is Object ID needed? Object ID was designed to help recover stolen cultural goods and is now widely used for cataloging collections. It plays a vital role in preventing illegal trade in cultural heritage, and it supports global cooperation by enabling organizations to quickly share descriptions of objects, helping to build international networks for heritage protection. Different organizations have different information needs. For example, police need details about a theft, museum need information on an object's location and ownership, and the art trade focuses on an object's provenance. However, all of them need clear documentation to identify individual objects. The Object ID checklist outlines the key information needed to identify an object, with 9 main categories and 5 additional ones. The first category is type of object. So essentially, what kind of object is it? This helps classify objects and is key for finding records in both manual and digital systems. The object type can be recorded as a single term, so for example, a painting or a sculpture, or it can be a brief phrase, for example, painting on wood or exhibition catalog. Many organizations categorize their objects at 2 levels, placing them in broad categories as well as specific types. So as we go through the categories, on the right side of the screen, you will see the example form. In case of our example, portrait of Queen Anne of Denmark, level 1 is painting and level 2 is portrait. And a helpful resource for finding terms is the Art and Architecture Thesaurus, and you can see the link in the lower right part of the screen. The next category is measurements. So what is the size and or weight of the object? Accurate measurements are crucial for identification. For paintings, drawings, and prints, you should always record height first and then width, noting whether the size is unframed or side size. For sculpture, you should always record height and usually width and depth as well. Always measure at the highest and widest points, and for circular objects, measure the diameter. Next category is inscriptions and markings. So are there any markings, numbers, or inscriptions on the object? This includes any text or markings added during or after the object's creation, such as stamps, engravings, or labels. And it is important to always record where they are located. So, for example, on the back of a painting. Inscriptions and markings are important for identifying objects, especially when there are many similar items. And they can also reveal the maker, origin, date, or material, and may even provide provenance details. So for the objects my colleagues and I care for, such as, for example, the paintings by the artist Boris Buchan, it is common for the artist to have titled the artwork, signed it, and noted the year. These details are all recorded under this field, depending, of course, on the type of inscription. So in our case, the field type of inscription would include title, signature, and date. Mhm. Text should be recorded exactly as it appears, including any errors, with SIC in brackets to show the mistake is part of the original. And if parts of the inscription are unclear, you should note what can be read and indicate any gaps. If uncertain, you should always add a question mark. And if an inscription is illegible, you should also note that. For ancient languages or pictograms, you should mention the inscription's presence and consider adding a photo or description for context. For example, in our case, when we have some stamps on some of the objects, the policy is to always write a description of the stamp. The next category is date or period. So when was the object made? Most objects can be dated exactly. So age is usually given as a range, part of a century, or a cultural or historical period. If an object was made in one period and later altered, both the original creation date and the date of the changes should be recorded. So, for example, the object was made in the early 17th century and it was reworked in, let's say, 1879. The next category is maker. So, do you know who made the object? This could be an individual, a company, or cultural group. Knowing the maker helps narrow down searches and can increase the object's historical significance and value. And also, if different people were involved in its creation, their roles should also be recorded. So, for example, you can have an artist, an engraver, a builder, an architect, and so on. The next category is subject. So what is depicted or represented in the object? Is it a landscape, a battle, a woman holding a child, and so on? Subject is one of the most important ways to identify an object, but it can also be one of the hardest to describe clearly. It should be simple enough for anyone to understand, even without specialized knowledge. For example, a statue of a man with bull's head might be identified as Minotaur by experts, but others may not recognize this. So to make it clearer, the subject could be described in both expert and non-expert terms or plain terms. So, for example, Minotaur, you should write Minotaur and man with bull's head. Subject can be recorded as a text description or as a series of keywords. And a helpful system for classification is icon class. It is a database that provides definitions for objects, people, events, and ideas. You can also see the link on the screen. The next category is title. So does the object have a title by which it can be identified? A title is a word or phrase used to identify the object, given either at creation or later. Sometimes the title is part of the object itself, such as carved into a statue or engraved on an etching. And in these cases, it should also be recorded under inscriptions and markings. The next category is distinguishing features. So does the object have any physical traits that help identify it, like damage, repairs, or defects? An object's physical condition is a key way to uniquely identify it. This category includes features like scratches, stains, cracks, or repairs. A combination of description, photos, and sketches is the best way to document these features. You should always choose distinguishing features that are large enough to see with the naked eye and durable enough to remain identifiable over time. For works on paper, this might include tears, creases, stains, or watermarks. And for paintings, it could be crackling, brush strokes, or damage. Also, important to keep in mind that the reverse side may also provide useful details. And on the right side of the screen, you can see examples of cracks and scratches in the paint layer. You should always record the exact location of these features to make identification easier later. However, for high-value, well-known works of art, details of distinguishing features should not be publicly shared for, of course, security reasons. Finally, we have description. In addition to information covered in the mentioned categories, a short description should be written to help identify the object. Descriptions can either add details not covered in other categories or summarize the information that's already recorded. The goal is to create a clear picture of the object in the mind's eye of the reader. But since description alone may not be enough for non-experts, photographs are essentials. So basically, description and photos should be complementary. And also important to note is that you should avoid using specialist jargon or using vague words like interesting or rare or simple or something like that. So as mentioned, in addition to the 9 main categories, there are 5 additional, and we will just briefly go over them. So the first one is inventory number. This is the number used by museums or collections to identify an object, such as accession, catalog, or registration numbers. These numbers help link the object to its records and distinguish it from others. They can be simple numbers or include details like the organization's acronym and the acquisition date. If the inventory number is inscribed on the object, it should also be recorded under inscriptions and markings. In our case, for example, all the works in the collection in our care have clearly marked inventory numbers, and they are also recorded under inscriptions and markings category. Next up is related written material. This includes references to other writings about the object, such as published articles, reports on its significance, history, conservation, scientific tests, or information about its maker. The next category is place of origin or discovery. This records where the object was made or found with as much detail as possible. Keep in mind that the place of creation may be different from where the object was discovered. Next up is cross-reference to related objects. This records an object's connection to other objects or people, such as historical links or preparatory sketches. For example, in our case, we have posters, sketches for those same posters and the original designs. And we also have audiovisual material that is also related to those posters. We record all this information in the category cross-reference to related objects. And the last category is date documented. This is the date when the object's description was written. It can also help establish ownership, showing when the object was in the possession of a person or an organization. When it comes to identifying objects, a photograph can be very helpful, but its value, of course, depends on image clarity, on lighting, and perspective. Object ID provides tips on photographing art, antiques, and antiquities, including how to choose the best angles, backgrounds, and lighting. We will cover the technical aspects of creating 2D and 3D reproductions in future webinars. Of course, you are welcome to join, and details will be available on our website and on our social media. So to conclude, there are 4 steps to take into account when describing an object according to Object ID standard. You should take photographs of the object, identify the categories of information, write a short description including additional information, and keep the documentation in a secure place. And now that we have covered all these categories and summarized the standard, you will have the opportunity for some hands-on experience. So you can choose any object that is in front of you. For example, I don't know, a pen, a water bottle, or if you have a photograph or painting or a painting next to you, that would also be great. And then try to complete a template for Object ID that is on your screen. You can also collaborate with one another and consult. You will have 15 minutes for this exercise, and if you come any questions, of course, we will answer them together after the exercise. Does anyone have any question, maybe? Or if you are maybe already finished, we could move on. All the microphones are unmuted, so you can ask questions, or you can ask a question in the chat if that's easier for you. And also, would anyone like to share what they wrote, or do you have some questions about what you have written? Okay, if nobody has any questions, or maybe you think of a question later, feel free to send us an email if you have any questions about the template or about the standard itself. You can find all the information about Object ID in these 2 booklets that you can see on your screen. I would just also like to point out that Object ID is not a replacement for other standards. It's a specific tool designed to describe cultural objects for identification, and it can be used alongside existing databases, standards, and policies. And that is also the case for my colleagues and myself. So On that note, I would like to invite my colleague Mirna to tell you more about the next standard that we will cover in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mirna. I'm also part of the RCtoDC team here at Ursula. And today I will tell you a bit more about the next standard, which is the Spectrum standard. Spectrum standard is a UK collection management guide used worldwide, and it was developed by Collections Trust. Spectrum helps museums, libraries, galleries, and archives manage and use their collections more effectively. It provides practical advice on everyday tasks like moving objects and updating location records, as well as occasional tasks like updating insurance. It covers 21 key procedures for managing collections. Spectrum is suitable for museums of all sizes and types, and is also useful for similar institutions. Recently, it has been adopted by several countries and translated into multiple languages. So let's take a look at what the Spectrum procedure consists of. Each procedure has a definition that tries to sum up the procedure in a single sentence. So for example, for the object entry procedure that you can see on your screens, the definition is logging all objects into your care for whatever reason, including loans, inquiries, and potential acquisitions. Below it is a fuller note on the scope of the procedure, which explains when to use it and at times when to use a different procedure. Each Spectrum procedure also contains the Spectrum standard. This is what you should aim to achieve, however you do it. And there are two parts to the standard. On the left side, you can see some policy questions that you will need to consider. For example, in what circumstances will you accept objects in your care, or who is authorized to do so, and so on. On the right side, you can see the minimum requirements that you should meet in your museum's own written procedure. And for each minimum requirement, there is an example or two suggesting why this is important. Another part is the suggested procedure, and keep in mind that this is only a suggestion, which is given in two formats. On the left side is a flowchart summarizing the suggested ways of doing things. And on the right is a text version, which includes the information requirements for the procedure. Where needed, the text versions of the suggested procedures also include guidance notes. As you follow the text version of a suggested procedure, you will notice that the bits of information you might need to record are listed. For example, object name, entry number, brief description, etc. Spectrum calls these concepts units of information, and it also gives guidance on how to record them. So Spectrum Standard has 9 primary procedures. These are the ones that most museums will use most of the time. The first one is object entry. It includes recording all objects coming into your care, including loans, inquiries, and potential acquisitions. This procedure includes providing a receipt for objects, outlining your terms for accepting them, assigning an identification number, and capturing important details. So on the right side of your screen, you can see an example of a filled-in object entry form, and this one is by Collections Trust, along with guidance and explanations. It is up to your institution what the form will look like. So of course, it doesn't have to look like this, but it's important to follow the Spectrum procedure to make sure that you have all the relevant information. Acquisition and accessioning is the second primary procedure. Acquisition means transferring ownership from the previous owner to you, and the procedure provides proof of ownership and assigns a unique number to each object. Accessioning involves a commitment to preserve the objects long-term based on your collecting policy. If you acquire objects for other purposes like handling or display, you should follow part of this procedure, but you shouldn't formally accession the objects. On the right side, you can see an example of a transfer of title form. This form is used during acquisition to record details and transfer legal ownership of an object. Location and movement control. It is important to keep a record of where each object in your care is located and update it whenever an object is moved. You must track objects both when they enter and when they leave your museum, as well as within the museum. And keeping these records up to date actually ensures that you're accountable for your collection. On the screen, you can see an example of an object movement ticket, which is used when an object changes locations within your institution. It allows you to record the old location and the new location of the object, as well as the date of the move, the person moving the object, and the reason for the move. Inventory includes ensuring you have the essential information to track the objects in your care and address any backlog if needed. This means that every object is given a unique number, has a recorded name and brief description or image, and that you know the current location and owner of every object. So if required, you should be able to produce a complete list of every object in your care. Cataloging refers to gathering and managing information about collections from multiple sources, as objects often have more than one story. Your cataloging system should be inclusive and adaptable, as there's always more to learn. So in the reality, no museum ever fully finishes cataloging. Object exit is a procedure used to track when objects leave your museum, whether it's for identification, deaccessioning, or disposal. It applies anytime objects exit your building. On the screen, you can see an example of a filled-in object exit form, again with some guidance and explanations. Loans in includes managing borrowed objects for a set time and purpose. Loans are usually for exhibitions or research projects, and they should always have an end date. So permanent loans should be avoided. And when the end date is reached, you can always renew a loan, acquire the object, or simply return it. Loans out is used to review and manage lending requests for exhibitions or other purposes. You should always have a written procedure that explains the steps to follow in case an object is considered for a loan. And finally, the last primary procedure is documentation planning. It focuses on planning and managing documentation projects, including setting goals, creating a plan, tracking progress, and solving any issues. Aside from the 9 primary procedures, there are also 12 non-primary procedures. We won't go through all of them today, but we will take a brief look at a few that we usually use when caring for a collection. It is possible that you will use some of these procedures more often, but some of them you might not have the opportunity to use. This depends on the type of institution and collection you are working with. The procedure that we often use is condition checking and technical assessment. It includes documenting the condition of objects and noting any recommendations. We usually use this procedure as part of audit. So periodically, we check the condition of objects to see whether there have been some changes. This helps guide decisions on how to treat, store, and use the objects. Then damage and loss. This procedure covers everything from minor damage to major incidents like fire. The focus here is on documenting the incident and recording the actions and decisions that follow. For example, a few years ago, there was an earthquake during which some books in our care endured major water damage. So following the spectrum procedure, we informed the owner and recorded all the circumstances. We did a condition report documenting the damage, accompanied by photographs. And finally, we documented everything in our collections management software. Rights management includes managing intellectual property and data protection rights for objects, reproductions, and information. For example, we use this procedure when a reproduction of an object in our care is being featured in a magazine. And then the last procedure that we will talk about is audit. At a basic level, this procedure includes checking if your records match the physical objects. So checking if you have all the items, if they are correctly numbered and in the right location. It can also be used to assess the quality of your documentation. In our case, we periodically go through parts of our collection and we check that the information is correct and still relevant. So to conclude, inconsistent data is almost certainly a problem, even in the best-run museums. Therefore, the Spectrum standard offers a clear guide for managing museum collections, helping ensure that objects are cared for properly and records are accurate. By following this standard, museums can improve their practices, stay compliant with the laws, and make collections more accessible to the public. It helps museums improve over time, and it ensures the long-term care of cultural heritage. And now I would like to give the word over to my colleague, Ivan, and he will tell you more about the last two standards. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan. I also work at Ursula, and I will talk a little about two other standards. So, just a sec. Yeah, okay. Object ID and Spectrum, which we just mentioned, are standards for recording and managing physical objects in a collection. However, application of these standards generates digital data or metadata. So in order to be able to search through all the information about objects in your collection, that data needs to be organized in a database. So it's equally important to implement a standard for organizing metadata. One such example is Dublin Core. It's a set of guidelines for creating metadata records for resources that are either born digital or have been reformatted from an existing physical resource, such as photographs, texts, audio, video, or 3D artifacts. Dublin Core was developed by the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative. It's a global community working to improve the interoperability and accessibility of information on the web. Note that while in previously mentioned standards we talked about objects, Dublin Core uses the term resource. So the core idea behind Dublin Core is to provide a framework for describing resources in a way that's easy to understand and apply, while also being flexible enough to meet the needs of a wide range of disciplines and applications. Dublin Core is widely used for describing digital resources in libraries, archives, museums, and other institutions that are involved in information management. It's also commonly used in web-based applications, especially for enhancing searchability and discoverability of resources. For example, Dublin Core metadata can be used in library catalogs, digital repositories, web pages, learning management systems, or content management systems. So we hear a standard template of Dublin Core. So this standard is composed of 15 basic elements or descriptive categories. They are used to describe a variety of resources. So the first category here is title, which is simply the name given to the resource. Here we have an example. We will use the novel by J.D. Salinger, The Catcher in the Rye. The next element is creator. This means this refers to the person or entity responsible for creating the intellectual content of the resource. It can be a person, an organization, or a service. For example, here we have J.D. Salinger as the author. Examples of creators include authors of written documents, artists, photographers, collectors, organizations, and so on. Next one is subject. Sorry. This can be a keyword or phrase that describes the topic of the resource. So for our example, we have American literature, coming of age. So what's the content of the resource? What's it about or what it is? This is expressed by headings or keywords. It can be phrases, names, or other terms. So for significant people, places, and events. Best practice recommends that subject terms be taken from a controlled vocabulary whenever possible for more accurate retrieval of resources. For example, the already mentioned art and architecture thesaurus. Next, we have description. It's a textual description of the resource. For example, here, a novel about a troubled teenager. It can include an abstract, table of contents, free text account of the content, or even a reference to a visual representation of content. Next is publisher. This refers to the entity responsible for publishing the resource. Here we have Internet Archive. For digital objects, publisher is the entity that created the digital resource. In the case of an object that existed in another form before being digitized, the publisher of this earlier form may be entered in the source or contributor element. Which brings us to the contributor. So this is a person or organization who made significant intellectual contributions to the resource, but whose contribution is secondary to any person or organization already specified in a creator element. So contributor could, for example, be editor or transcriber or illustrator, etc. Next one is date. This is simply a date associated with the resource. It could be, for example, a publication date or creation date. It includes dates of creation for the original, which would then be tagged date original, and for the digital resource, which would be tagged date digital. So, for example, the original book, The Catcher in the Rye, was published in 1951, but the digital version was created and made available online in 2022. So you should put both of those dates. Next one is type. This refers to the nature or genre of the resource. So it could be text, image, video, software, or a physical object. Next one is format. So the file format, either a physical medium or the size of the resource. Here also you have many types of formats. So you could say format extent, which would mean size, duration, or dimension, or format medium, which would refer to the material or physical carrier of the resource. For example, maybe something in PDF format or JPEG or a hardback book. This example also shows how data can be qualified. That is how metadata also itself has metadata. So the next one would be identifier. This would be a character string or record number that clearly and uniquely identifies a digital object or resource. So for those of you who work in a museum, I assume all of the objects in your care have some kind of a catalog number which is unique to the object, by which you can identify it. So this element actually ensures that individual digital objects can be accessed, managed, stored, recalled, and used reliably. The next one is source. A reference to a resource from which the present resource is derived. So in our example, this would be a PDF file which was derived from a physical book that was scanned. Yeah. So we use the source element to cite any other resource from which the digital resource was derived, either in whole or in part. Some digital resources are born digital and derived from no pre-existing resource, and in these cases, the source element is not used. Next one is language. Simply enough, it means the language of the resource. This implies the language or languages in which a text is written, or the spoken language of an audio or video resource. So sometimes even visual images, usually they don't have a language unless there is significant text in a caption or in the image itself. So in that case, you would put down the language. Next one is relation. So this refers to a reference to other related resources. This could be a sequel or a related article. So, for example, a resource may be a different version of something, or a replacement, or a part of something, or a format of something. So in our case, the scanned book is a format of the original print book, but presented in another format. Next one is coverage. This refers to the spatial or temporal extent of the resource. So for our example, this would be United States, 20th century. So this includes the locations or periods covered by the resource, not the publication date. This is an important difference. Next would be rights. This refers to information about the rights held in and over the resource. So things like copyright statement or usage restrictions. It contains a right management statement for the resource or a reference to a service providing such information. It can be in the form of a statement or a link. So in summary, Dublin Core provides a foundational metadata standard that makes it easier to catalog, share, and retrieve information. Its simplicity, combined with the ability to be extended for more detailed use cases, has made it a key tool in the world of information management and digital resource discovery. For more information on this, you can visit Dublin Core official website, which is linked here on the screen. And finally, we will briefly cover the Europeana Data Model and some of its key features. So it's the metadata standard developed by Europeana, the European Union's digital platform for cultural heritage. As we all know, Europeana aggregates and provides access to millions of digital items from European museums and libraries, galleries, and archives. So the Europeana Data Model, or EDM, is specifically designed to enable interoperability and integration of cultural heritage data across diverse institutions, making it easier for users to access and explore European cultural content online. This data model is built on top of existing international metadata standards, including the already mentioned Dublin Core, but with a focus on capturing the relationships between cultural heritage objects and their metadata and other resources. So what are some of the key features? of this model. First of all, as I mentioned, interoperability, which means that EDM accommodates metadata from various institutions and sectors by providing a flexible structure that can integrate heterogeneous types of metadata. This enables the integration of cultural heritage content from a range of different institutions and platforms across Europe. Next is linked data support. EDM uses principles of linked open data to ensure the data is machine readable, which means it's usually published in formats like RDF or JSON LD. It connects to other data sets on the web and can be enriched through connections to external sources like Wikidata or DBpedia or any other repository of knowledge. This forms a kind of web of data where different pieces of information are not only accessible, but also interlinked and enriched through connections with other data sources. Next one is modularity and extensibility. Oh, sorry. This means that EDM is flexible and extensible, allowing institutions to describe their digital objects in ways that suit their specific needs while still adhering to a common framework. And lastly, one of the key features of EDM is its ability to model relationships between resources, such as objects, collections, people, events, etc., giving them context. This enables a richer representation of cultural content. So, as I mentioned, Dublin Core uses the term resource, but EDM uses the term Europeana object. Just a second. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so what is a Europeana object? Europeana object refers to any cultural heritage item represented in the Europeana digital platform. So its characteristics are, first of all, you need to have a cultural heritage item. This could be a physical artifact, like a painting or sculpture, or a born digital item, like digital artworks or maybe audio recordings or stuff like that. So the object itself is known as the Provided Cultural Heritage Object, or CHO for short, in the Europeana Data Model. Second of all, it has descriptive metadata. So EDM relies on a combination of Dublin Core and additional fields to describe the object. These can include basic descriptive information like title, creator, description, and date, as well as more specific information like the type of material, language, rights, and access conditions. These are called descriptive properties and are tagged with DC, as you can see on the slide. The relationships between resources are especially emphasized in EDM. So, for example, a painting may have relations to an artist, an exhibition, a specific style or movement, and even related works. EDM uses these relationships to link different pieces of data and create a more interconnected representation of cultural heritage. So this includes metadata like is part of, which would mean a resource that is part of a larger collection, or is related to, which would mean a relationship between different resources that do not necessarily belong to the same collection. And these are called relational properties or linking properties. They are also tagged in a way that is machine readable. Metadata usually is contributed by partner institutions using the Europeana Data Model. And third is digital representations. So Europeana objects are accompanied by digital representations such as images of paintings or manuscripts, audio files of music or spoken recordings, videos or performances or historical events, or texts from digitized book or manuscripts. Access and licensing is fourth, so each object is linked to a web page hosted by the contributing institution, where users can view additional details or the full digital versions. And also rights and licensing information. So, for example, open access or copyright restrictions are provided in the metadata. And lastly, multilingual metadata, which of course means that metadata is often provided in multiple languages to improve accessibility for a diverse audience. So, to conclude, these are some of the major benefits of the Europeana Data Model that we already mentioned. So the Europeana Data Model is a comprehensive and flexible metadata standard that enables the aggregation and sharing of Europe's cultural heritage in the digital age. And by emphasizing relationships between resources, using linked data principles, and supporting interoperability with other standards, EDM plays a crucial role in the digital cultural heritage ecosystem, ensuring that cultural content is not only accessible, but also discoverable, reusable, and connected to the wider world of knowledge. So to conclude, today we have discussed standards that focus on both physical objects of cultural heritage and those that relate to the metadata associated with these objects. These standards play a crucial role in ensuring that we can not only preserve and protect the physical and digital representations of cultural heritage, but also manage and organize the valuable information surrounding these artifacts. By combining these standards effectively, we are able to create a comprehensive framework for the successful preservation and digitization of cultural heritage. This allows us to make these important cultural assets accessible to a wider audience, ensuring their longevity and availability for future generations. And I would like to invite you all to follow us on our website and social media accounts for more information about the project. And stay tuned to hear about our future webinars. So I have my colleagues here. If anyone has any questions about what we all talked about, you are welcome to ask them. You can put them in the chat or maybe contact us through your mic. Well, if
there are no questions, maybe someone would like to share their experience, if they have any experience with either Object ID, Spectrum, or Dublin Core, EDM. If you have any experience you would like to share, maybe. Well, as far as the resources go, for now, the plan is to have the video of the webinar available to everyone. So you can maybe download the presentation, the material, and the video, and look at it once again and go through the material, all the links that were available. We'll see what we have planned as far as more resources go. Just check if there's anything else. Okay.
Yeah, okay. So once again, thank you all for participating in this webinar. We hope you learned something new, maybe gained some new insights into the importance of museum standards in preserving, managing, and sharing cultural heritage. And finally, we value your opinion, so we kindly ask you that you take a few minutes to fill out the feedback form by scanning the QR code on the screen.
If anyone has thought of any questions, you can email us any questions, suggestions, comments, anything. The email was on one of the previous slides.
Mhm.
It's in the chat as well, so feel free to contact us. In case you don't have any questions, we want to thank you once again for participating. We hope to see you in our future webinars, and that's it then.
Yes,
Thank you,
follow us on social media.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.